All right. Think we're ready to go. You can let everybody in. Hello. Hello, everybody. I know you're all coming in. I can see you. I see so many friends on the list today. Oh, how fun is that? I'm so excited for this conversation. I want to say hello to Amy Louise, to Doug McCullough. Welcome. Erica Fletcher, Erica Fuhrer, Janice O'Rourke, Naomi Savas. Hello. It's so good to see you here. We're so glad you all are here and you're all just coming in as you would, and we do on these calls. Please introduce yourself, whatever you'd like to share with the group in chat, and identify your pronouns. We actually just had pronouns day, didn't we? I think we did. And November is a big, big month for Awareness Month for LGBTQ plus identities. So it's always top of mind for me, as you know, if you know me. But welcome. I'm so happy to see all of you. Hello, Janice. Hi, James. Good to have you. Ramona. It wouldn't be a community call without you, Ramona. Shannon Tomlinson, welcome. Jessica, Medea, Adrian, welcome. This is wonderful to see all of you. Thank you for making the time. We have an amazing leader today joining me, somebody that I've known for a while and a company I've really known for a while. So we go way, way back, and I can't wait to kind of get a little deep into the history there too, and share what it means to me on a personal level and for what it's meant to JVC over the years. But anyway, if you are joining for the first time, welcome. This is going to be an hour, and the chat, please use it, ask your questions, interact with each other, share resources. I love to see what you all are reading and utilizing in your world. Chances are we haven't seen it. Anything, books, new data that's out, anything that's working for you. So as Gena and I kind of go through what her role has been and what we've seen be successful, please, add in your plus ones, add in the nuances in your organization, add in your challenges, because this is quite the brain trust that gathers for these calls. And, if you're wondering or have questions or are struggling, I could be pretty confident in saying either Gena and I will keep an eye out and see if we can address some of the questions that you have. And then this audience is so knowledgeable too. So you are welcome here, whether you are new to the work, whether you are very advanced and have been doing this for a long time. We are all going through so much change right now with the challenges and backlash. And we're also a couple weeks out from the election here in the US. So it's a really, really intense time for employers and for all of us having done the work and seeing our field be really challenged, I think, in unprecedented ways. And yet knowing more than ever, as we all do, that the work continues to be, if not as important, more important. And the cry for help and support and elevating everything that we care about is only getting louder. So we can rest in that. We can be reassured in that, that arc of moral, the moral universe is long, but it's bending towards justice, to quote MLK Jr. But this is absolutely like a bendy, twisty sort of year. It is really lots of one step forward, five steps back. I don't know how you want to say it, but anyway, I just a quick note too. I continue to coach some of you one-on-one around your story, around the book that you have in you, around the talk that you want to someday be able to give, the messenger that we need you to be. And if you are interested in that, please don't hesitate. And I see some of my coaches on the line here too, but I just love supporting you and elevating you and giving whatever I can from a perspective of, how to really do the thing that you've really wanted to do probably for a really long time and have not given yourself permission, not have had the time, the agency, the resources. But, it's so important that you do that thing. And Gena, you're going to share with us that there's some big things coming up for you too. So anyway, before I introduce you, stay tuned for our next call. It will be sometime in November. And we haven't exactly lined up the details, but stay in touch with me. And we are always announcing these things on LinkedIn. Obviously, you all are following me there. And the Will to Change podcast, if you're not listening to that, please know it's out there. And this will probably be re-aired as a podcast Gena, if that's okay, I'm going to assume.
Yes.
And yes, and it will also, the transcript will be shared with all of you sometime next week when we can kind of get our hands around everything and share it out with you. So hang in there. We will get it out to you. And I know you're going to learn a lot of really interesting things, or perhaps have some things validated today in our conversation with Gena. So welcome, Gena. Welcome to my community.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me,
Yeah.
Jennifer. I love this community, I love this work, and it's just really an honor to be with so many people that, yeah, we're in an interesting place right now. And so just to have this space and this forum to just share and just to know that, we've got each other. We're getting through
Yes,
this.
we
We're
do.
getting through it.
We do. And we're a giant community.
Yeah.
In fact, you and I were just talking before the call that 30% of Cisco's employees are involved in their inclusive communities, which is the ERG community and Cisco speak. And that's incredible. And I just want to say, like you just shared with me, when you hit that tipping point that most, this consensus is 25% of involvement in the networks, that it literally, it becomes a tipping point for being able to affect culture change at scale. Um, and I just wanted to start with that. Like, what a cool role you've had to, like, and I'm sure difficult and challenging too, and complex to, be aligned with your inclusive communities at Cisco.
Yeah, I tell you, I've been at Cisco for 27 years, and I have to say that this latest past few years in working with our inclusive communities, the people that are really the heart and soul of Cisco's culture and are really driving purpose forward, it has been such an honor to be part of this work. And I am actually, I've announced to you that I'm going to be retiring from Cisco at the end of next month. But I'm so excited about like what the future holds, because all that we've learned in this space, I feel like the work has just begun, and it's really the people that have really been driving me to think about what's next in my own journey in this space, because we have learned a lot, right, Jennifer, over the past 20 plus years, which I know you have been part of Cisco's own journey within purpose. But it's really an exciting time, but also, a challenging time to say the least.
Yeah, big challenge, big changes for you, and I'm sure this community will link with you and support you and lift you up. And like we need to have all kinds of messengers. We need every bit of us and every kind of us, I think, to be teaching these things from our lens. And speaking of lens, do you want to share a little bit about how you identify on a personal level, the origin of your passion for the work, the aha moments? And I think of your 27 years, you've been doing this work, whether it's been official or not, for over 2 decades at this in the Cisco ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. I said, I've been doing this work before we called it DEI, and it has been really a journey of purpose throughout my career. And so just kind of stepping back on a personal level. And so I identify my pronouns are she, her, and ella. I'm a first generation Cuban American. Both my parents came as teenagers to the United States from Cuba many years ago. I grew up in Miami. And I've actually lived in Virginia now for about 20 years. And when I think about my own identity, just like all of us, there's just so many aspects of it. And so not only identifying as a Latina, as the wife of an Army veteran, as now a new baby, almost call myself a baby boomer, but I'm an empty nester, not a baby boomer, but still. And now even looking at, I also am the caregiver for my elderly mother-in-law. And so like there's lots of different dimensions. And when I think about the communities, that's what's really been so magical about it, is because at Cisco, we have 29 plus communities, and there's literally a space and a place for all of those different dimensions of myself to find purpose, to find a place of belonging, to also help others that maybe be going through similar types of experiences as myself. So I've always felt like this is just work that is not just good, but it's also really kind of how a company like Cisco, as large as we are, how it really kind of we show up as a company with heart. And I know that, with us, our vision is to power an inclusive future for all at Cisco. And that means not just for folks at Cisco, but across the whole world, across our whole ecosystem. And that's where the magic of these communities really comes in. And we'll talk about what are some of those examples of like how this shows up, this purpose work shows up, that's really bringing a value to the company. So it's a little bit about me and my journey.
What a beautiful way to describe that parts of you are represented in these communities. You feel seen, I'm sure. And I was curious actually, like of the 29 or whatever, what are the last kind of batch that were created? I think because that's an
Oh, yeah.
interesting question to that gives us a window into the emerging need for community and being seen and heard, and the communities that are beginning to find their voice. And you're also probably beginning to recognize the value back to the company and the culture and the and customers, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I took over the leading the communities, we actually put a pause because we had a lot of communities, but we really didn't have kind of the rigor and kind of the understanding of what it meant to be a community. So we actually
Mm,
stepped back and said, okay, what does it even mean to be a community? And the reason why we call them inclusive communities and not necessarily ERGs or BRGs is because the whole portfolio is a broad spectrum. So you have communities that are around identity and representation, like our Pride community, our Connected Black Professional, Conexión, Women of Cisco Vets. And those would be kind of more your traditional ERGs. We also have a number that are focused on health and well-being, like our mindfulness and resilience, our Alzheimer's support, cancer support network, special children's network. And so a lot of those communities that really kind of come together to support people in their lived experiences as they navigate the challenges through either health or well-being. And then we have a number of them that are more business aligned. So we have women in cybersecurity, women in finance. And so those are opportunities for us to kind of build the support for those underrepresented individuals that are specifically in a particular function within the company. But to your
mhm.
point, what are the most recent ones? Well, what's exciting is that, we really do listen to our employees and about what they are most concerned about and what is most top of mind. And we're actually getting ready to launch a Palestinian community and a Jewish community network at Cisco. And that was truly because we knew that there was a need and that our leaders recognized that we needed to have a space for us to be able to provide that support and that really giving us a lens into the lived experiences. And so that's something that I'm really proud of is that, we are kind of moving and leaning into the voice of our employees, and that's making us a better company as well as we do that.
Yeah, this is not uncommon. This is an ask that we are hearing a lot and guiding as consultants, guiding some of our clients along that journey too. And but it's a courageous choice and it's the right choice. And it's to me comes down to the proper, like all networks, the proper chartering and boundaries and sort of rules of engagement, if you will. And like with any what's the word? A community that's experiencing so much pain
Mhm.
and just needs to come together, and that is I'm really, really glad that you're acknowledging that and the need for community at this time, always, but particularly at this time, and not shying away because it is dispiriting to see institutions like everything being very fearful right now and not leaning into the needs and not doing what they can to build the space. We can figure out the bylaws and the norms and the boundaries, like that's figure outable, but whether these actually exist and come into being and are supported by the company is a hugely significant and symbolic thing, a choice for a company to make and say, we are going to keep this space a constructive one, but we're not going to, we know how to do that. But the fact is it has to exist first, and build it and they will come, right? There's sort of this bottom up, cry for support and being seen and having community. And then there's sort of the top down piece where that's happening and you add the infrastructure and the support and the air cover for this
Mhm.
to occur. And it's sort of this like blend of top down and bottom up that I think is always so critical when you're launching things. But sometimes companies have a lot of one and not the other. And you can still
Yeah.
start when you have a lot of one and not the other. But ideally, I know you at Cisco that you were probably incredibly mindful about making sure things were all aligned.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes the right choice is not the easy choice. And I tell you, it has been an incredible learning experience to really to listen and to understand like what are we missing here? And I think what really kind of made me excited and a little bit kind of stop in my tracks because again, I've been doing this work for a long time. I've stood up communities from the scratch. I've relaunched communities. I was very involved in our veterans community for many, many years. But there's actually a currency in being part of these communities now, where it's not just like this nice thing on the side that people kind of do on their own. It's not kind of connected to the bigger strategy. People are asking, we want this. And so we had to figure out, well, what does this mean? And so that means not only does it mean providing support and resources, providing sponsorship, ensuring that you have the right kind of structure and guidance, from the team so that you can kind of navigate the ins and outs. But the reality is that people want to be part of these communities. And so we just had the balance of like, what does that mean? And what is the expectation if you do become a community? And what is your expectation of us to make sure that you're successful? So I think I mentioned to you, we just launched our first ever, we call it the Blueprint for Inclusive Communities. And so basically we have an operating manual end to end that literally co-signs to all of our policies and procedures and guidelines. It's over 100 pages. Now, we don't expect everybody to read it, but as a new leader, when you're coming into this work and you're saying, sign me up, I want to be part of this, we now can give you the right guidance that's consistent, that's equitable across all of our communities. And so that we really have more of that foundation and that governance in place. And I think that's something that we can share with other companies as well that are trying to stand up their own communities. It's like, how do you do this? What are the pitfalls? What are the things that we really need to be investing in? And what are some of the more nice to haves?
Yeah. You've always been really, I think, generous. And back in the day, 20 years ago, Cisco was my first client, everybody. And I had what felt like at the time, like free reign, like to create with all of you. And you're all just so smart and strategic, and you always have been. And we came up with this progression model. Some of you may be familiar with it because we still use it. It has like 5 phases of maturity. And that final phase of maturity is that you are actually, as a company, impacting the ecosystem beyond you, that you are, your communities have become so kind of strategic and numerous and large and influential that they're actually kind of like creating thought leadership that is lifting, the tide together outside of the walls of the company. And so what you're describing is that you touch hundreds of thousands of people outside of the company, and that the groups they're mature enough and they're structured enough. And somebody just said this in chat, you must have a lot of infrastructure to be able to stand up this many and make sure they're being everything they can be, and particularly dealing with some sort of provocative ones, like the ones that you've just mentioned that you're standing up to. But anyway, but I'd say like that level 5, Cisco's always been there, questioning and like proving out the case for these groups, and really profiling them and positioning them as part of your sales process, as part of your philanthropy, as part of your outreach, like an integral part. And that was originally what kind of motivated me to invite you, Gena, on this call, because, whether it's your Native American group, guiding the sales team, and establishing communities on reservations where there's opportunities there to create a sales relationship. And I hate to even say that because sales is not a bad word. I mean, literally you're bringing needed infrastructure to communities. So anyway, I just, that's one thing that comes to mind as a very advanced application, I think, of what we do in this D&I world. And it's certainly not, you'll not hear anybody that criticizes DEI giving any of these examples, but we all know that this is true, that this is actually how we add value. We may not be the best cheerleaders for all the value that we add, honestly, but I know that it's true how you all have shown up over and over. So yeah, what other examples, or you can just dive into that one if you'd like.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I was going to say, what's interesting about Cisco as a company and the way that we operate is really, truly, we rely on our partners, right, to sell our products and our services and solutions. So 80% of our technology is actually not done we don't sell it direct from Cisco. It's through partners, channel partners, and suppliers and so forth. And so that same model is like, we need to ensure that we have the right partner infrastructure and also the trust of our partner ecosystem to be able to go in and to be successful in our own business. And so I think we take that similar approach, even with our philanthropy and the work that we do in our purpose work is, we don't want to just hold it to the vest and say, this is ours. And, we want to share all of our knowledge, and we want to be able to lift up other folks within the ecosystem. And so I think that's just innately how we are as a company. We've always operated in very much about being more about just ourselves, but really good for the world. And so with that in mind, I think that's really driven some of the work that we've done. We actually have a program called Partnering for Purpose. I'll try to send you the link there. But what we've done is we've taken some models of practice and use cases and sharing them with our customers. So if you want to stand up inclusive communities, or if you want to do a philanthropic, endeavor, if you want to help support HBCUs, we're actually giving you kind of our guidebook and kind of our framework to help other companies be able to be successful in this sort of work. And so I think that's an untapped opportunity for companies to just, the more that we can share with others, the better the outcomes for everybody. I think that's the next kind of evolution of this work in DEI, is bringing others along the journey, so that we're not starting from scratch every time, but that we're all learning from each other. So with regards to some of the, the dirty word, right? The business impact or the sales aspect of this, it is hard to quantify, to be honest with you. And a lot of it is just really giving our folks on the ground, our sales teams, the right understanding of the value proposition behind our purpose work. And so they're out there selling products, but can they be selling purpose, right? And so when they're coming to the table with our customers and saying why Cisco, for example, is the right company to do business with, is yes, we have great products and solutions and service and what have you, but we're also invested in the communities where we are. And there's really great examples of that. So the Native American Network is one example where our engineers were going into Native American reservations, wanting to expand broadband access, and recognizing that there are some cultural sensitivities that maybe they weren't aware of, and that maybe they weren't showing up as best as they could. And so they engaged our Native American network to build some training modules for the sales team so that they can go in and be better prepared and really show up with sensitivity as they expanded that business opportunity. And that's just one example, but that's when you tap into your people that are, diverse and have those lived experiences, and you bring those insights to your conversations. I know with our veterans or ERG, bringing them to the table when we have conversations with our biggest customers, like the Department of Defense or the Veterans Affairs, when you have people at the company that represent that particular group, it just changes the dynamics, quite frankly. And again, it's hard to quantify. We can't say, we'd love to, and maybe we'll get there someday, but we know that it does make a difference in those conversations and how people view us as a company that really is invested.
Right. I love that. There's a bunch of really wonderful questions in chat. Back to the creation of the new networks, particularly the faith-based one. I wondered if what has the reception been to that, and how well, maybe it's a new effort and you haven't really, talked about it too much. I don't know how widely you've disseminated it and what sort of reaction you've gotten, but as we go and create more, like do more listening, deeper listening, and create the things that are being asked for, inevitably, there's going to be questions about legitimacy. And, I hate sometimes what I hear, not ever from Cisco, but aren't these groups divisive? Isn't this sort of defeating the purpose? And it's always so interesting. I'm like, no, like let's have a conversation about why that's not true. But unfortunately, that belief is out there. So there is a question about reactions. And did you plan for that? Has it gone more smoothly than you would think? Is it too early to say? Where are you in that process?
Yeah, I mean, it is early, literally like within the past month. But I will say we've had an interfaith group for many years at Cisco.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And so so that space does exist and that community does exist and very strong. And it encompasses the broad spectrum, right, of different. I think what we realize is that just given the, what we're facing right now and the current climate, that there was a gap or a need or a void, right? That need that we needed to address. And it was something that we were really thoughtful about and realized that, it could, create some challenges, and that's okay. Like I said, some of this work is really messy, but so we lean towards what's right and, and trying to do the right thing. So we're still not, I think the big part of it, to be honest with you, is making sure that those communities are not just insular of that particular identity group, but that it becomes an opportunity for allyship, becomes an opportunity for conversation, and to cross kind of just conversations to connect people that may not be aware of the different challenges. So by having those communities, it just shows that look, maybe I could be a better ally. Maybe I don't understand the lived experience of this particular group that's going through these challenges. I will say we recently had our first ever summit where we brought together all of our inclusive communities, including our newest communities, to a room
Mm,
into one space back in July. And it was powerful. It was amazing to just bring everybody together and just say, we are all different, but we are more alike than we're not. And so it's just a beautiful way to kind of kickstart this new kind of moving forward into this work and realizing there's a lot of challenges, but we can celebrate each other at the same time.
mhm.
We're going to continue to learn and grow. And hey, if there's other folks that are navigating it as well, we'd love to hear from you. Maybe that's a conversation we can have.
Yeah. Anyone in chat, there's some dialogue about we are restricted from talking about religion. So how do we stand up faith-based networks and communities when that's true? Uh, so anyway, I wondered, was that well, that could be different around the world as well. It also could be a company policy. So are you familiar with that barrier, Gina?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, we've navigated, within our guidelines and our framework, we refrain from political advocacy within our communities. I mean,
Mhm.
that's not really the intent of our communities, right? The intent is to create a space of belonging, to connect people, to raise awareness. But when it comes to anything regarding political advocacy or even kind of that is more divisive, I think we just have to navigate that, and it's challenging. So I think everybody just has to be really clear about what you can or can't do within the walls, within the framework of your company
Mhm.
or organization,
Mhm.
and just, kind of figure out the reality is that these communities are good. There's goodness to its core, and that's where they should stay, and that's where we really need to focus on. And when we
Mhm.
start veering across where it doesn't feel that way, we need to address it, and we just say, we have to have certain guidelines that are aligned with the company's policies and guidelines as well. That's
That's
what we're
good.
aligned to.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. Another, yeah, complaint with so many inclusive communities. Another challenge, obviously, is being a small team with sort of proliferating networks, right? And not having very clear criteria about how they're chartered, what they exist to do and not
Mhm.
do. So the clarity there is really important. You mentioned a document that's open to anyone to access. Gina, is that something you could share with our community?
Yeah,
Um,
we have our partnering for purpose. We haven't built out the one specifically around our inclusive communities, but we have best practices around our blueprint. And so
mm,
maybe there's a conversation about what would an operating manual include, because we've kind of gone through the gamut. And so there could
mm,
be some frameworks there. But the partnering for purpose is really about how do you take some of the philanthropic work and kind of expand it and some tests. So I'll
mm,
provide the link to that. That's separate from our DEI and our inclusive communities, but it's a nice framework about, how do you do charitable work? How do you stand up, community impact programs and matching gift programs? And how do you engage with communities in various ways? And that's evolving.
mm.
So yeah, we'll provide some resources.
That's great. So
It's a big learning curve in this space. And again, we've been doing this a long time,
long
and
time.
I'm learning so much every single day, and we don't have all the answers. But what would be really interesting is, like, collectively in this community, think about the knowledge that we all can bring to this work and like help others that are maybe starting out at the early rungs of this maturity model, and maybe help
Mhm.
them accelerate their own processes, because I think that would be really great for us to be able to help others based on what we know and learn.
Absolutely. I think we've got to leverage each other's. And that's what was so cool about writing those two papers that I did with Cisco years and years ago before you and I even knew each other, was especially the executive sponsor paper. And I want to ask you about that. And for those of you that don't know about that, we put the link in chat. But as I was deep into Cisco as a client, it struck me that the executive sponsors weren't clear on their role and confident of what they could do that would have the most value, and what hat they should wear, and what the networks needed, and all that. So it was really cool to have the Cisco name as I went around and asked each chief diversity officer, and I probably went to maybe 60 of them, and this was maybe 15 years ago, and said, who is your exemplary person? Why are they exemplary? What do they do differently? What do they intuitively understand? How do they support the network in a way that really means, really is results in a concrete lift of their capabilities or ability to have impact? And everybody said, "Oh, I know exactly the executive that you should talk to." Everybody, it just comes to
Yeah.
mind. And so we wrote about those folks, and we actually, I know I developed a model of different. It's not a maturity model, but it's more like 5 hats that
Mhm.
um, an executive sponsor can wear, and they're switching back and forth between them. It really depends on where the network is. So I was asking you what your process is for assigning this wonderful professional development opportunity, which, I know we all agree is an incredible opportunity for growth. Like, how do you assign accountable executives, and what does it mean for them to step into that role? And how does it change them? And then I kind of wondered, with these most recently created ones, how are you navigating like the choice of executive sponsors? And if you have like a philosophy on, do they need to be a part of the group? Do they need to be an ally of the group? Like, those other questions that always come up.
Yeah. So, I think part of it is a lot of times they are organic, and many times like it's just a natural fit where, people inevitably are either part of the community already or they lean in. Sometimes like with our Native American network, our, EVP of engineering, became the executive sponsor after having worked with them, and kind of helping them with this, this work that they were doing, that I mentioned earlier. And so some of it is organic. Now that we have more clarity around like what it is, and I love the hats that you wear and the different personas, because I think it really, first and foremost, has to be genuine, right? Leaders have to genuinely feel a connection, not necessarily identify, but more importantly, just recognize a connection with that particular community, because that goes so far. And so there are different expectations, that we have for our leaders. We want them to show up to their, annual flagship events and kind of participate and be there to really guide them through challenges. We don't necessarily ask them for any financial investment, because we do give them funding outside of that, so they don't have to go Tim cupping to their leaders. Because what happened was, a lot of times is that our communities saw a lot of inequity, because those that had the executives with the deeper pockets, operational pockets, were the ones that were getting a lot more, and that's just not equitable. It's not fair, and so we try to kind of minimize that. But to be honest with you, we are evolving. We do try to have at least 2 sponsors per community, because I think not only for succession planning and for continuity, but also just different perspectives. And I think one of the biggest opportunities is truly, what I've seen is when you can truly be an ally. And I'll just give you an example, not only an ally, but a champion. So for our Pride community, we were actually going to be having one of our biggest sales conferences in Florida last year. And our Pride community came to their executive sponsor and said, we're concerned. And we have these issues, concerns about attending this conference, just given whatever the political climate, that we all, we're recognizing was a challenge for that particular community. And that executive went all the way to the leadership, at the leader level, and said, we need to address this. And so what they did is they came up with opportunities for us to show up as an inclusive company, and creating different ways that that event, while we weren't able to change the location of the event, we were able to do certain things at the event. For example, to hire minority-owned businesses, and to actually make a donation or contribution in that community to LGBTQ organizations, and to make sure that our leaders had the opportunity to show up with their pride pins while they were, on stage. And so we kind of created all these different opportunities to create a more inclusive event, based on the leader recognizing that there was, an opportunity for her to be able to better support that particular community. So that's just one anecdote that I feel showed up really strong in terms of how that leader recognized their role and the opportunity that they had to actually lean in. But it really just varies. And I think that, you have to kind of just go with really, truly having people that want to do the work and see the value in it. It's not an opportunistic thing. It's really about, yes, it's about their growth, but it's also what they can do to support that community.
Right. I love that. And it changed the trajectory of how that event looked and who that event platformed and acknowledged, I'm
And now it's
sure.
become a model of practice, right? And so now all of our events moving forward, we're thinking, wait a second, are we really being inclusive when we're coming, we're showing up at this event in these different locations with our customers? So
With your customers. It's an opportunity for education, right? And to not have something addressed when you're in an environment. I think I know where you're talking about too. When you're in an environment and not naming a thing that
Mhm.
is on the hearts and minds of so many people. Even within your client base, it's on the hearts and minds of your clients. And so, you taking a lead role as a company to say, like, we want to have this conversation. We're actually going to incorporate it. It's a big, I think, the elephant in the room, right? It's this big relief, I think, because I can imagine your clients have all kinds of, just to pick that LGBTQ plus identity dynamics in their lives.
Yeah.
And they have concerns and they have safety challenges. And so just naming, to me, that's leadership, is naming the thing that has not been traditionally incorporated or named, and showing how it can be done in a elegant way that once you do it, you probably will always miss it if you hadn't. Like it to me reflects, it just shows that you're reflecting a changing world, and you're acknowledging, this whole thing I think is about, just like ICs there, it's acknowledging that people are having a different experience in the same convention hall, in the same
Yeah.
state, in the same, right, it's in the same conference, like, and acknowledging that is what I think what equity really strives for, is always having that lens on everything we do, and looking for where is something not being addressed, and that people are craving, there's like an unmet need to feel seen and heard and have a conversation and have representation. And that's, to me, leaning into that need, knowing that exists, and then doing it first is leading. And
Yeah.
you have no idea how many things you changed in doing that.
Well, and a big part of inclusive leadership is proximity, right? And that's a big, we actually have a program at Cisco called the Proximity Initiative. And so it's an opportunity for
Mm.
leaders who really just to get proximate to individuals, not necessarily people even on their own teams, but we actually have a matching program where they have these conversations about their lived experiences. And that really just opens up the aperture for our leaders to say, I had no idea that this individual was, showing up at work every day, but yet was experiencing this. And so that lens is so critical as a leader to just have that proximate conversation and get close to people of difference and really understand that we have more similarities than we have differences. So proximity is crucial. We talk a lot about allyship, but allyship in action is really doing the work, right? You can call yourself an ally, but does that mean that you're an ally? Are you doing the work that it takes to get close? And that's why these communities are really kind of a great place to make that happen, is to kind of just get those connections. So it's beautiful to see that happen, especially when you see a leader who maybe have disconnected in the past and the light goes off and then all of a sudden they're all in. And just because they had that conversation, they just realized, oh, wow, I was thinking about this completely different. And it's usually somebody that's many, many levels below them that are teaching them those teachable moments that are just so precious. I love seeing that.
I love that too. Yeah, we see that sometimes in like reverse mentoring
Yeah.
programs, where the executive is the mentee, and the younger emerging leader is the mentor. And it's such a flip, and so challenging for people to even consider that may be a way they can learn. But I love it. It's like the right kind of challenge, right? It's appropriate, because the amount of wisdom about the future, what that future demographics are going to look like, what the future values are going to be, what belonging looks like in the future, for whom, and who says and who gets to define what that is. All of that insight is in our emerging talent. But we don't spend a lot of time getting proximate to that, listening, asking questions. And then I think as leaders, challenging our own comfort zone to say, like, well, I've always done this and this has worked and this is what's rewarded here. Do we just keep doing the same, or do we really open ourselves up to leading like fundamentally differently? And I think that proximation, I love that word. It's a beautiful word. Is it an initiative, kind of like a reverse mentoring, where people are they assigned? Do they sign up? Does it involve your ICs? Like, how's it
There's a
structured?
training, yeah, and shout out to my buddy Alex Allen, colleague, and who actually has helped really shepherd this whole proximity initiative at Cisco. And we actually have been talking to other companies about how they can leverage the same model within their organizations. And so again, going back to how do we share and partner around purpose, is giving these similar types of tools to other companies, which is it's been a great program. We also have a program called the Multiplier Effect, which is more around sponsorship. And
Mm.
you can Google multiplier effect. We'll give you the link too. And it's really a pledge for leaders to say, I'm going to spend some time really, sponsoring somebody that, to help them navigate their careers and bring them into my meetings and, and have them kind of come along, a customer call with me and giving them exposure that they wouldn't necessarily have, which can really be transformative for individuals. And so that's been another initiative that's been really positive as well. So I think one of the things that I'd love to see more of, and what really is, driving my passion lately, is how do
Mm,
we connect companies around purpose, and how do we start to show up? Because one of the things I realized too is we all invest in these different nonprofit organizations. If you think about, just take a city, take a handful of companies, likelihood of us investing in similar types of organizations and showing up and,
mm,
volunteering or donating technologies. What if we were to connect the dots between different companies to show up with purpose to drive, let's say maternal health as an issue, or drive more, advancement of veterans in their transition as an example, and like coming together as companies with all of the portfolio resources that we have around DEI, around philanthropy, and really making a significant investment collectively. I don't think we've
mm.
even scratched the surface there because we're all focused on what we do and not
Yeah.
necessarily of what we can all do when we come together around purpose. So that to me is kind of an
Mm.
exciting area for us to explore a little more. Now that we kind of know what we're doing, we've got the foundation. What's the
Mhm.
next evolution of this work?
Sounds like it's the next maybe project for you.
We'll
Um,
talk.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and it also protects our field because it's the many hands making lighter work. It's also the strength in numbers
Mhm.
too, and this is not going away. If anything, it's the call for purpose, the need to feel it, the need to act from a place of purpose, and not just it's a triple bottom line, but I think it's beyond that. That it's that sort of the acknowledgement that there's all these intangibles that inform engagement and belonging, and we're just, I think, scratching the surface of what those actually are, and to whom, because I think it differs generation to generation. We were all kind of raised in these different eras where we couldn't expect to feel a certain thing, and we didn't think we deserved to feel a certain thing, and we certainly didn't have the option to work from a place where we felt that, our purpose was awakened, or that
Mhm.
it was something okay to talk about, something okay to, to use as a filter in our assignments and jobs and et cetera. So but I
Yeah.
do agree with you. You're a gorilla in a ecosystem that should you choose to pull that group together, what is really possible. Could you like fast forward a year or two, and this is actually happening, what you're describing, what does it look like? What does it look like, and what is it impacting, and who's at the table? And give me an example of what that might look like in practice.
Well, I think the first place to start to get there is to move away from the scarcity mindset and to stop
Mm,
thinking about DE&I and inclusion about just some and not all. And so I think that to get there is to kind of be more open about, the impacts that we can make as companies. So I'll give you an example of what I've worked on in the past, because it could be an interesting model. And so when I was leading our veterans work a few years back at Cisco, we recognized that there was a real need for talent, and there was a great talent pool that was really untapped in the transitioning veteran community. And what Cisco did is we actually partnered with our competitors. We partnered with Amazon, we partnered with Palo Alto and a number of other tech companies, and said, we're all providing training and certification and ways to kind of bring in this great talent, but we're competing against the same talent for each other. So we
mm,
created almost like a funnel, and we called it Cyber Vets USA. It's a program I'm really proud of because we all brought together our resources and our training programs. And we, in essence, said, hey, if you're a veteran, you want to come into tech, we'd love for you to come to Cisco. But if it's not Cisco, here's a number of other companies that you can access free training, and then we'll help you get employed in this industry. And so that kind of consortium that we created was really powerful because we said, hey, let's put down the swords and let's really kind of do something so that we can all benefit. And so for me, that's a model I'd love to see, not just with the veterans community, but I think in any area where we're challenged with great talent, we're trying to access the same pool of diverse talent. If we come together, I think it could be really powerful if we just kind of move away from the scarcity mindset or, this is our program and not yours. What could we do if we put all of our resources together? It could be really powerful.
Um,
There's a lot of opportunities there.
yeah, I'll call you back, okay?
uh-oh, got
Interesting.
somebody
Okay,
off mute.
thanks.
We can
I'll
mute
call
them.
you back too. Take my number.
I'll call you back.
Future.
Um, That's so good. I mean, again, another example of the Cisco way of thinking really big and generously, and not assuming we're competing, because it's dividing up the pie so thinly sliced, and it doesn't actually lift a whole community, right? And the fact that it makes me think of the average job tenure with a company is shortening and shortening and shortening, and there's so much more mobility, and there's so much, particularly as younger talent like views their relationships as very transitory and very transactional in a way. And you might get that purpose driven person for a time, but it's short time, and yet you can swim around in the ecosystem for many years, and go from this to this to this to this project, whatever. And I predict it will be that way. It already is. So what you're doing is actually you're capturing talent in an ecosystem, and then the moving around is, predicated on life stage and, bosses and the nature of the work and all that stuff. And hopefully
Yeah.
you capture talent that finds it so aligned that they won't actually go out and, like, I don't know, start their own thing, and even if they do, we celebrate that, right? It sounds to me like you have the expansive mindset enough to say this is an ecosystem that isn't just about the companies, the big ones, but all the little ones that are created, and all the entrepreneurs, and all the vendors, and all of the the communities that we serve of customers. Like, it's a whole ecosystem. If you were to map it, which I'm sure you have, it just sort of reaches far out, way beyond. And I think getting people to think about business, it's conscious capitalism, I suppose, but that doesn't seem to go far enough. It's really a different kind of business model that I think caretakes for an entire ecosystem and kind
Yeah.
of strengthens an ecosystem, which is ultimately what we want.
Yeah, and I think that one of the challenges that I've seen, again, I've led our, philanthropic work at Cisco for many years. I led our veterans work for many years. I'm now leading our D&I work, is that though even within an organization, they're very fragmented. And so they don't realize that, hey, we're investing this significant amount of money into a particular issue or area. Let's just take homelessness, right? And so we've now kind of made a huge investment in, a nonprofit organization. Are we leveraging our veterans community, for example, to actually go in and help mentor some of these homeless veterans? Like, how are you starting to kind of take the investments that you have already, put into those communities, but then leveraging your human capital and your resources to really develop an even more, kind of robust engagement model. So, what I see is that even within companies, they're disconnected, right? So the philanthropic side of the house is not talking to the D&I side of the house, is not talking to the talent side of the house. They're all kind of doing amazing work, but how do we kind of hone it all together? And so that, I think, is an opportunity internally. But then how do we look beyond our own and start to see where are other people investing, and how do we tap into other resources that are out there? So it's a lot, but I just think that it could be really interesting when you take a few companies maybe and just kind of test out the model and see like what amazing work can happen when you bring all those powerful purpose-driven strategies together in a really comprehensive way.
I love that. You're right. Nobody talks to anybody, and it's so siloed. And but it takes us as, I think, narrative creators. Like what you're saying is the ability to tell the story, weave the story together, and get the pieces of the story, and then tell the story and sell people on the story effectively, right? And then get some sort of infrastructure going, and put a stake in the ground to say, like, here's this radical vision that might be counterintuitive, which I think some of the best ones really are. I mean, I think this stuff is like new pathways. It's new ways of thinking about how we make money, quote unquote, how we develop our talent, how we make a difference. It goes so much deeper than a lot of that. I mean, it's almost become jargon at this point. It makes it really real. But I think one of our most remarked on competencies as a field is the way we storytell around a really exciting vision, and we put that together for people because they can't see, they're in silos. But some of us can kind of get to this level and look and see the potential here, and then you have to hold that vision. And that's what great D&I teams do, I think, is like hold this vision for change and articulate and describe what that is, and then figure out all the pieces they need to align to get there. And then, deal with the resistors, deal with the early adopters. Some people are going to get it immediately. Some are going to resist. There's the messy middle, which is sort of that, the biggest part of the bell curve, which is, getting them to kind of awaken and adopt and see and kind of like dip a toe in. So it's really, I always think about change agility and adoption, and change management is such a critical part of our work. Like Gena, when you mentor people in this work, as it's changing, the work is changing. Do you think the skill set for us needs to change, or are there domains that you lean on heavily that most people wouldn't think are part of leading this work in an organizational context?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, when I think of some of the core skills and even my own core skills that I have, which have either I've gotten through my education or I've evolved over the years, my Cisco education, sometimes I call it Cisco University, since I've been here so long, much of my knowledge is actually framed around the work that I've learned at Cisco. But a lot of that, you talk about storytelling, like that ability to really kind of hone in on messaging and being able to articulate value proposition. I think people innately, and certainly even some cultures, mine included, we don't always talk about the goodness. And so often we walk away after we've done some amazing things and we're on to the next thing. And so really having the ability to really articulate value and the why behind the work, I think is a really critical skill set. I think a lot of it is around kind of connection and collaboration, being okay, like being really nimble too, because the change is inevitable. That's the one thing that has been constant in my entire career is change. And if you can't lean into that, then you're going to be a dinosaur, because that's the only thing that you can expect, is that things are going to change. And if you can be open-minded about being really collaborative and thinking about, like, I have certain skill sets, but this person has other skill sets that can really bring value to this work. And so I think those are really critical. I'm really excited and nervous, like everybody else, around AI. I think this is a really exciting opportunity for us to figure out, like, how does this make us smarter? And how do we leverage AI as we're starting to kind of really figure out the work and kind of expedite it more rapidly? So obviously there's AI in the tech world, but even in kind of the work that we do is how do we get those knowledge, those kind of that information that we need to kind of, instead of spending so much time with the research and kind of validating the data points and, these metrics and so forth, like let's have that at the ready and then be able to go and do the work at a much faster pace. So I'm trying to lean into AI a little bit, as I'm kind of thinking about my next journey here, and see, if that's going to be able to accelerate some of this work a little bit faster. So
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's sort of like the skill set, the things we used to have to do that now we can get help with, right? That shortens the runway so much so that we can then grow and develop new, skill sets, whether it is spending more time on storytelling and creating the vision and the narrative and becoming, in a way, a marketer in the best sense, because you have to be a marketer to sell the vision. And then you've got to enlist everybody and get everybody excited. And you have to identify champions and leaders, and you have to set it up, right? But the thing we need to get smart, because our work has always been hard. It's always been endless and hard and complex and sort of really overwhelming and obviously emotionally taxing too. So if anybody needs to work smarter, not harder, taking full advantage of this new technology, it's us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
I
we need that.
And the thing that I would never think I would admit, I love process. Like and I feel like my brain works in two ways. So I feel like I have a bit of an engineering kind of trying to fix things all the time, and the more creative aspect of it. So there's a balance there. But I just think that process actually makes life easier. And so when we rolled out our blueprint, the whole team was a collective sigh of relief, because we no longer had to take those calls of, like, how do you open a PO, or how do you, schedule a speaker, or how do you, do transition planning? We had it all there. And so I really embrace it now, because it makes our lives easier, and there's consistency, right? If you know the process, if you understand kind of how to get from A to B to C, then it just alleviates a lot of that unknown, and it lets you do the really important work and powerful work versus getting kind of stuck into process that doesn't exist. So
yeah, very, very good point. Very good point. And it's sort of the uniquely human work too, which is what you're talking about, which is, I think the thing, hopefully nothing will be able to do exactly what we do
the
in the way we do it. We'll
connections, and
see.
it kind of going back to the going back to the beauty of communities is those connections, those relationships, the real kind of heart and soul that that you find within these communities. One of the things that I realized really quickly when I was starting to lead the communities is that, we are kind of always on first responders when we're supporting these communities, because you're supporting a pretty significant part of the employee population. And when times are challenging or when they face some difficulties, the community is the first place they go. So we have, WebEx teams, we have, they're kind of like Slack channels. And so when something happens, whether it be a Supreme Court ruling or whether it be, God forbid, a human disaster or war, what have you, they always go to the community first to kind of get settled and figure out kind of what support is needed. So what happens is that we then become a critical link to our HR organization to help our employees navigate some of that, so where do I find support, or how do I get help for this? The communities become that first line of defense, to be honest with you, in terms of navigating your space within a company. So that's a powerful kind of currency to have when you have a robust community, because then the leadership realizes that this is an opportunity for them to have a line of sight into the employees and their lived experiences and how they can react, respond, and support them.
Yeah. What a beautiful image, the first responders. And it reminds me too that people are bringing in, emerging talent is bringing in a lot more of themselves to the workplace, which is what we've been talking about forever, right? That creates healthy cultures, but it also blurs the lines of accountability on the part of the employer of to what degree are we first responders? To what degree are we here to solve, or is our responsibility to solve or support for the full person, And so it's like, you cannot use a slogan and say, bring your full self to work, and then not actually account for and plan supporting that person. And we have a generation who's not afraid to also share all those pieces too, right? So, but this is not a problem. This is like, it's an opportunity. Yes, it's uncomfortable and it's new, but it's such the early warning mechanism, I think, of inclusive communities and ERGs is this truth. It's this real, like, on the ground human experience that the people are having. And the question to me always is like, where does the workplace and begin and end, and what is the role when the needs are changing so much, and the needs for the workplace to be something more than it's been in the past, whether it's more purpose driven, whether it's more support for mental health, whether it's those are all things I think that are bubbling up a lot. I mean, not just bubbling up, but I think kind of washing over companies. And we see many companies ignoring this. We see, like, return to office no matter what, I think is a really kind of, that's a choice, but it's not helpful for the full humans in our organizations. And we've heard lots of blowback on that, but some companies are hanging tough with that. But I think that there's this beautiful thing.
We have to educate leaders at all levels. Like, so that's where there's a big kind of divide, right? When we think about like the work of these communities, you're getting kind of really you have, a huge percentage of the employee base there. You have executive sponsors and they're getting proximate. And so there is that, but in the middle, and you call it the messy middle, and truly it is like, what can we be helping our leaders to see in terms of like the why, the decisions that they make impact their employees. And if they're not understanding that kind of experience with how it's going to change, it changes productivity sometimes, and depending on, the choices that they make, how they choose to or not to support their employees really, can impact the culture of the company, significantly. And so it's really important that leaders understand that those choices that they're making shouldn't just be about black and white and graphs and, charts and stuff like that. These are people, these are humans that we're dealing with. And so having that proximity, having that lens towards the impacts, I think is really an opportunity. And one of the things that we've been looking at doing is creating more focus groups, creating more opportunities to kind of get that. We actually created a focus area called Voice of the Community to start to listen to what are some of the challenges and kind of bring that forward to our leaders. Just that voice is so powerful to have the ability to just understand what's important, what are we missing, and then get leaders to really hear that, because it's easy to just ignore and kind of talk to the hand. But if it's there and we're putting it in front of you and saying this is important, then they can react in the appropriate way. And so I think as a responsible company, leaders need to take accountability and to be responsible for the decisions that they make.
Couldn't agree more. And we need to put that data in front of them and make it as personal as possible. And then once they've seen it, they're accountable for it. It's like,
Yeah.
well, you've been shown. So
Yeah.
the choice then to not adjust or allocate resources or publicize a certain, priority, that is then a choice to not acknowledge. And that's a losing proposition. I mean, that's a very short-term decision.
Yeah.
It would not be what I would expect great leaders to do right now, which is to listen, to learn, to be open, to challenge, to champion, to talk about the thing that they don't yet understand or may not be experiencing, but that they've been shown others are experiencing. Those are the best leaders is ones that are able to kind of, take their lens and understand when that's helpful, but also to be able to see belonging and culture as it's experienced by others. And that is the insight. I mean, driving from that place, I think would change a lot of the decisions that are made and the way that leaders lead right now. And we need to have that role modeled. We need to see what that looks like and sounds like in practice. So Gena, oh my gosh, we're out of time.
I know that was fast.
Yeah, it went really fast, but we got so many lovely, thank you everybody. And I know some folks had to go, but we got.
Can't wait to read the chat.
Yes, it's so fun. It's so fun. We always come off mute and thank you with our voices, those of us who can, Gena. So everybody here, if you would come off mute, 3, 2, 1, and thank Gena with your voice if you can, or
Thank
a
you so
sound
much.
if you can.
Excellent job.
Gena.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gena.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
rest of your
Thank
day.
you. I love it.
Thank you, everybody.
Congratulations.
Yeah. See you soon.
See you
See
soon.
you soon. I know you're not going anywhere.
No,
I
not
know
going
you're- Oh,
Thanks,
thank you for
everyone.
joining me, Gena, so much. And everybody, if you missed it, we'll send out the recording and the chat. You know the drill. But Gena, like, I know I don't even need to say like best of luck, because I'm sure we'll be probably collaborating in some way. But your knowledge out there, at large, I mean, it's going to be really exciting to see what you do with it. Thank you.
I appreciate you. This community is amazing, and you are really inspiring me to think about what more we can do. And so I'm so excited to be collaborating with you. Thank you, Jennifer. You're amazing.
Thanks,
Such a
everyone. Thank you,
powerful.
Gena, and thank you for your work all these years, and to be continued. All right,
TBD.
everybody, hang in there. I'll be
Thanks.
talking to you shortly in November. We'll see what that month brings. Should be an
Hang
exciting
on.
one.
We're
All
gonna
right.
put the strap ourselves in.
Putting on the flak jacket. Okay. See you
Okay.
later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.